new question marks over the veracity of Princess Lilibet's birth certificate, and it also raises serious concerns about whether Meghan Markle has been honest with the public about her daughter's birth. Harry has now admitted on the record that he will not allow them ever to come to the United Kingdom. Well,
they have been wrong before. They have been caught before. And yet somehow, every single time a new question surfaces about Meghan Markle, the people asking it are treated like the problem. Not today. Let's start with something that should stop you cold. Medical professionals, doctors, nurses, women who have personally carried and delivered children have come forward and said the same thing, independently, repeatedly. That what they observed about Meghan Markle's baby bump during her pregnancy did not behave the way a genuine pregnancy behaves. These are not tabloid gossips. These are people with clinical knowledge of what a pregnant body looks like, how it moves, how a bump sits and shifts. And their conclusion was unanimous. What they were watching did not line up with any pregnant woman they had ever encountered. That is not a rumor. That is a pattern of professional observation that nobody in the mainstream press wanted to touch. And now we are back. Because the questions never went away, they just got louder. Meghan Markle is under an intense and growing spotlight, and this time the conversation centers on something very specific: a document. Reports began circulating after Lady C stepped forward with pointed claims about Lilibet's birth certificate.
All other royal babies in the line of succession have had their births signed off. The only two children that there is no proof for is Prince Archie Bunker and Princess Lily. You better hope that she's really entitled.
And the internet did not take that quietly. The reaction has been immediate, global, and impossible to contain. Royal watchers, casual observers, people who have never given the monarchy a second thought, all of them suddenly have an opinion, because what is being alleged cuts straight to the most basic question you can ask about a public figure. Is the story you were told actually true? Here is what makes this so damning when you step back and look at the full picture. Every other royal baby in the line of succession has a clear, documented, verifiable record of their birth. You know the location, you know the time, you know the names on the paperwork. The chain of evidence is unbroken. Every child, except two, and those two children happen to belong to Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. That is not a coincidence you can explain away with privacy concerns. People are now watching this situation with a level of scrutiny that Meghan and Harry cannot afford, because a detail that once looked routine has transformed into something much more significant. A royal-focused researcher named Paula M. has been doing what journalists refuse to do, pulling from publicly available records, cross-referencing official documents already released by major outlets, and focusing on something very precise: the identification number attached to Lilibet's birth certificate.
We have seen that in Lilibet's birth certificate, it states that her number is 105. So surely that is California, right? It turns out that California is 104.
This is not speculation built on nothing. These are public domain records, and what they appear to show is raising questions that are only getting harder to dismiss. Those opening digits, reportedly 105, are supposed to correspond to a specific geographic location. And that is exactly where this story takes a turn that nobody in Meghan's camp is going to enjoy explaining. It points to Colorado. Let that land for a second, because Meghan and Harry have been publicly explicit about where Lilibet was born. They gave us the hospital name, Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital. They gave us the timeline. They gave us the anecdotes. There was even a story shared about stopping for food on the way to the hospital, a detail that seemed designed to humanize the moment, to make it feel warm and spontaneous and real. And now, that same story is being dragged back into the spotlight. Because when you place it next to what the document codes reportedly suggest, people are asking a very direct question. Does any of this actually match? And we are not the only ones asking. Critics are going through this story beat by beat, detail by detail, pulling at every thread. Because that is what happens when you have spent years positioning yourself as the victims of a system that lies about you, and then the documentation surrounding your own children starts generating its own questions. You do not get to claim persecution when the scrutiny is coming from the paper trail you left behind. There is more. The medical professional connected to this birth has also come under the microscope, with claims surfacing that her practice was shut down in the period following these events, leaving patients without their provider. Beyond that, there is discussion about her professional household having significant ties to advanced fertility expertise, a detail that certain observers are treating as relevant context rather than coincidence. These claims have not been officially confirmed, but they are not disappearing either. They are accumulating. And every new layer added to this story makes the overall picture harder to explain away with a simple clerical error. What gives all of this its real weight is the comparison point. This is not how royal births work. This is not how they have ever worked. Think about every child born into the British line of succession in living memory. Princess Beatrice, Princess Eugenie, the children of Princess Diana, the children of Catherine, Princess of Wales. Every single birth came with documentation that was clean, verified, publicly confirmed, and essentially bulletproof.
And let's not forget that Archie is 6th in line to the throne, and Lilibet is 7th in line to the throne, which is insane.
The record existed because the record was required, because these are not private family matters. These are matters of constitutional significance. The line of succession is not symbolic. It is legal. So when the documentation surrounding Archie and Lilibet generates this level of scrutiny, the institution is not the problem. The standard is not the problem. The standard has always been the standard. What is new here is a couple who walked away from the institution while insisting their children still hold their place within it, and who now cannot seem to produce the kind of clean, consistent, verifiable record that every other royal child in history has had behind them. The demand for clarity is not going to soften. If anything, it is getting sharper with every new detail that surfaces. Because Lilibet and Archie are in the line of succession. That means the public has a legitimate interest in knowing exactly where they were born, when, and under what circumstances. And right now, the answers to those questions are not as clear as they should be. Not even close. And that is precisely where the pressure becomes impossible to ignore. Because what we are talking about is not a tabloid rumor circulating in the corners of the internet. This is a constitutional matter. The line of succession doesn't just affect one family's reputation or one couple's legacy. It carries legal and institutional weight across multiple sovereign nations. The United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, every Commonwealth realm with the crown at its head has a direct stake in the accuracy of what's being presented. That is not a minor footnote. That is the entire foundation of why this conversation refuses to die.
Some royal families would not allow young princes or princesses to be in the line of succession if they were not educated in the country of which one day they might serve.
The people asking questions aren't doing so out of idle gossip. They are doing so because transparency in matters of royal lineage is not optional. It is the minimum standard that the institution demands of itself. And right now, that standard has not been met. Not clearly. Not cleanly. Not in a way that should satisfy anyone paying serious attention. What's driving this deeper into public consciousness is the fact that there are really only two frameworks being debated, and neither one flatters Meghan and Harry. The first is that everything surrounding these births is entirely legitimate, but the couple managed it with such consistent opacity and self-serving narrative control that they inadvertently manufactured their own credibility crisis. The second is darker, that key details were never presented with the clarity they required, and that the confusion isn't accidental at all. It's a byproduct of a pattern. A couple who has built their entire brand on selective disclosure doesn't suddenly become transparent when transparency is inconvenient. Either way, this is their doing. Full stop. What makes it worse is that voices with medical backgrounds have entered the conversation. People who understand how births are documented, how timelines are recorded, how standard procedure works, and they are noting inconsistencies that don't sit right with them. None of that constitutes a final verdict. But it does mean this is no longer just public speculation. It means the questions being asked are informed questions, and informed questions don't go away until they receive real answers. The pressure is compounding. Every week that passes without clarity adds weight to the doubt, and the doubt is no longer fringe. Then there are the visuals. The photographs and footage that have circulated widely and that critics have dissected with painstaking detail. People who watched Meghan's pregnancy appearances closely have raised pointed questions about what they observed. Every pregnancy is different, and visuals alone prove nothing. But those images are still being analyzed, frame by frame. Because when trust is already broken, people look harder. That is the environment Meghan and Harry created through years of manipulation. They built it, they own it, and then you land on something that cannot be reframed or spun away. The royal family's official website. Right there, publicly visible, is the current line of succession. Prince Harry listed, followed by Archie and Lilibet. Official, documented, and completely at odds with a couple who claims they want nothing to do with the institution they left in ruins. Those names sitting on that official page, undisturbed, unchanged, completely indifferent to the chaos Harry and Meghan have caused. They are not a footnote. They are a live contradiction. And the fact that nothing has been altered, removed, or formally addressed is precisely why this conversation refuses to die down. Every week that passes without a resolution is another week where the gap between the Sussex narrative and institutional reality grows wider and more impossible to ignore. Public discussion is getting louder. The official record stays frozen. And the tension between those two things is the entire engine driving this story forward. What makes it even more layered is what we are hearing from behind palace walls. The suggestion is that King Charles is well aware of the friction this creates. He sees the tension. He understands what it means. But the calculation, for now, appears to be one of deliberate restraint. Not weakness, but strategy. There are already enough pressure points on the monarchy without deliberately igniting another one. Opening a formal public debate about succession, about Archie and Lilibet's place in it, about what Harry's exit actually means for the line. That is a fire that does not go out quickly once it is lit. And so the approach appears to be stillness, managed quiet. At least for now. But here is where the long game becomes impossible to ignore. Eyes are turning toward Prince William, and they have been for a while. The understanding among those watching closely is that when the time comes, William may not share his father's preference for quiet restraint. A different era, a different king, a different set of decisions. That possibility alone is enough to ensure that this issue never fully disappears from the radar of people who are paying attention. The question of what William does next, when the moment is finally his, is one of the most significant threads running underneath all of this. Then there is the matter of connection, of roots, of what it actually means to be positioned within a line of succession for a nation you no longer live in, no longer serve, and by all visible evidence, no longer have any meaningful relationship with. There is a genuine and growing argument that children who may one day carry responsibility within the British royal structure should have some grounded connection to that country, its culture, its institutions, the weight of what those titles actually represent. This was never a formally written rule. But as several voices are now pointing out, it was an expectation that existed in practice for a very long time. Whether modern circumstances can justify a permanent exception is a debate that is no longer happening only in private. And that is precisely what makes this situation so volatile. Because what starts as a conversation about succession protocol does not stay narrow for long. Once this debate enters the wider public arena, once political commentators, activists, and figures with their own agendas decide to step into it, the conversation expands rapidly. It stops being about royal rules and starts being about the monarchy's entire legitimacy, its structure, its place in a modern nation, and who ultimately has the authority to define all of that. That expansion is not hypothetical. It is already beginning. The caution being urged by some comes directly from that recognition. This is not a contained question. And the fact that the monarchy operates not just within the United Kingdom but across multiple sovereign nations adds yet another layer of complexity that makes any quick resolution essentially impossible. These are not decisions one palace can make unilaterally. There are other governments, other public interests, other stakes in play. Every nation involved has a position. Every position creates friction. And the couple at the center of all of it, the ones who created this ambiguity in the first place, are nowhere near any of it, living comfortably in California while the institution they abandoned is left to manage the wreckage of choices they made entirely on their own. And let's be clear about what that wreckage actually looks like up close, because it isn't abstract and it isn't theoretical. It is a living, breathing institutional headache that did not exist before two people decided their comfort mattered more than their commitments. The complexity of managing Harry's position in the line of succession isn't a minor bureaucratic footnote. It is a multi-government coordination problem. Every realm that still recognizes the crown as head of state has a stake in how succession rules are interpreted and applied. That means any meaningful adjustment, any formal clarification, any structural change doesn't happen with a single decree. It requires consultation, agreement, and deliberate process stretched across multiple jurisdictions. The institution moves carefully because it has to. And it moves slowly because people who actually understand consequences built it that way. That slowness, that caution, has produced a very visible split in how people think this should be handled. There is a faction that believes the public deserves full transparency, that something as foundational as the line of succession cannot be left in a gray area indefinitely, and that clarity, even when uncomfortable, is the responsible choice. But there is an equally serious faction pushing back, arguing that forcing the issue too aggressively risks creating diplomatic friction and unintended consequences that could spiral well beyond the original problem. Both positions have merit. Both positions exist because of choices Harry and Meghan made. That is the part that should not be glossed over. This entire debate, this entire institutional headache, was authored by two people who are not participating in any of it. And the public noise doesn't simplify anything. You've seen the demonstrations. You've seen the anti-monarchy gatherings make headlines. But when you look at them honestly, the picture is far less unified than the coverage implies. Reactions to those gatherings vary enormously, and serious observers have raised legitimate questions about whether they represent a genuine groundswell or a vocal minority amplified by media interest. The debate is loud, the path forward is not clear. And every institutional decision made from this point forward will be scrutinized by every stakeholder on every side. Then we get to the polling. And this is where it gets genuinely revealing. Because despite the noise, despite the relentless drama, the monarchy as an institution still commands strong support across the United Kingdom. The numbers hold. What the data actually shows is that the collapse in approval is not directed at the Crown. It is directed specifically at Harry and Meghan. That distinction matters enormously. It tells you that the public has done exactly what we have been saying. They separated the institution from the individuals who weaponized it. The monarchy didn't lose the people. Harry and Meghan lost the people. But then, the conversation takes a sharper turn, because underneath all of this sits a question about vulnerability. About what happens to the line of succession if something sudden and catastrophic were to occur. Senior royals have historically been disciplined about travel arrangements precisely because continuity cannot be left to chance. Queen Elizabeth herself was known to take this seriously, reportedly insisting that direct heirs avoid unnecessary shared risk, keeping the line of succession protected under any conceivable circumstances. That discipline was not ceremonial, it was structural. It was the monarchy protecting itself from worst-case scenarios the way serious institutions do. The concern now is whether those practices are being maintained with the same rigor. Some observers believe the protocols have loosened, and while a catastrophic succession crisis remains statistically unlikely, the fact that people are raising it at all reflects how much ambient uncertainty this situation has generated. When the question of institutional survival is even entering the conversation, something has already gone wrong upstream. That upstream failure has a very specific point of origin, and yet here we are, watching that benchmark get discussed, debated, and quietly questioned. Not because the threat is dramatic, but because the atmosphere surrounding the monarchy has become uncertain enough that people feel the need to revisit the basics. That is the real damage. Not a single explosive moment, but a slow, grinding erosion of the confidence that once made these conversations unnecessary. The historical precedent that keeps surfacing in these discussions is telling. Princess Diana famously pushed back against Queen Elizabeth II herself over the question of traveling with a young Prince William. The concern was legitimate. Having key members of the line of succession in the same vehicle, in the same airspace, was not considered appropriate, and there was notable hesitation at the senior levels of the palace before that decision moved forward. Diana's insistence ultimately carried the day. And now, decades later, some commentators are drawing a line directly from that moment to Prince William's own apparent approach to similar decisions, suggesting a certain inherited confidence, or perhaps a similar resistance to constraint, has passed down the line. What keeps this conversation burning is the frank acknowledgement that aviation incidents, however rare, are not zero-probability events. Recent examples have been raised in these discussions that point specifically to mechanical and technical failures, situations where even the most skilled and experienced pilots were not the variable that determined the outcome. That is the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this. It is not about competence. It is about the unpredictable factors no one can control, plan for, or pilot their way out of. And when you are talking about the royal line of succession, the margin for that kind of uncertainty is supposed to be as close to zero as protocol can make it. Reports have suggested that Prince William has received specific advisories around travel arrangements involving close family members who sit directly in the succession. Yet the indication from observers is that those advisories have not produced dramatic shifts in visible behavior, which has opened a pointed debate about whether the gravity of modern royal protocol is being absorbed the way tradition demands. It is a conversation that makes people uncomfortable, precisely because it sits at the intersection of personal autonomy and institutional obligation. Those two things are not supposed to compete at this level. The institution is supposed to win, every time. And that brings the entire conversation back around to where it always lands, the line of succession itself. Some voices in this debate argue that the moment you begin seriously discussing succession structure, you have already cracked a door that is extraordinarily difficult to close. That door leads directly into the rooms where more controversial figures and more combustible questions are waiting. The hesitation to push too aggressively is real, and it is rooted in that exact fear that one pulled thread unravels more than anyone intended. Then the story takes a sharp turn. A well-connected journalist has put forward a claim that the substance-use disclosures Harry included in his memoir were not simply raw, unfiltered confession. The suggestion, presented as a claim, not confirmed fact, is that those admissions may have been strategically encouraged with an eye toward future legal utility. Specifically, that documented public admissions of past behavior could be referenced in legal proceedings involving family responsibilities and parental fitness down the line. The implications of that framing are significant. If true, it would mean Harry walked into his own memoir as an instrument, and the hand guiding the pen had a longer game in mind than book sales. A source described as well-placed, and while that claim has not been independently verified, multiple commentators are treating it with notable seriousness, has introduced a framing that cuts directly to the center of this. The suggestion is that specific decisions within Harry's public life were not made impulsively or emotionally, but with deliberate attention to long-term positioning and personal protection. That every disclosure, every platform appearance, every declaration of grievance was placed with an eye on where it would land, not tomorrow, but years from now. And at the center of that framing sits Meghan. The way she is being characterized in these discussions is not flattering, and it is not meant to be. The portrait being drawn is of someone who operates with extraordinary strategic precision, someone for whom no decision is accidental, no statement is offhand, and no public move is made without an accounting of what it might yield further down the road. That's not a random accusation. That's a pattern of behavior that observers have been documenting since the moment she arrived on the royal scene. And what's happening now is that people are simply connecting dots. They were previously told not to connect. The speculation about what happens if the marriage ever faces serious structural strain in the future is where the temperature really spikes. The argument being circulated is that the documented public record, Harry's admissions, the narratives already locked into print and into interview transcripts, could carry real weight in shaping how any future legal or personal situation unfolds. These are not confirmed legal opinions. They are claims. But the reason they are spreading is because the logic holds and people recognize it. This is being reinforced by voices from Harry and Meghan's own professional orbit. Past colleagues, past observers, people who have worked alongside or near Meghan at various points are being pulled back into the conversation. The consistent thread in what they describe is someone who is acutely outcome-focused, someone who enters rooms already knowing what she needs to leave with. Those characterizations were made in various contexts over the years. Now they are being stitched together into a coherent picture, and that picture is what is fueling the debate. There are also resurfacing reports about early discussions around potential publishing projects connected to major personal life events. No official denial has been issued regarding those reports. And in a story this loud, silence tends to be read as something. Observers are reading it loudly. When you pile unverified claims on top of past testimony on top of conspicuous silence, the story builds its own momentum. Some insist it's unproven theory. Others call it a calculated architecture being assembled piece by piece. But everyone is watching. Now, the focus shifts to media, and this is where the frustration in this audience reaches a breaking point. A major outlet has published an analysis piece that assigns responsibility for the royal family's fractures almost entirely to King Charles and Prince William, while extending a strikingly gentle hand toward Harry and Meghan. That imbalance is not subtle. It is the kind of editorial angle that makes you stop and ask who benefits. Prince William is described using a characterization that critics say is years out of date, completely disconnected from the weight of responsibility he now carries. King Charles is framed as someone whose legacy could hinge on whether he makes specific personal concessions toward a son who left. And Meghan Markle, it turns out, has a documented prior relationship with this same outlet as a contributor and interview subject. That relationship is now being scrutinized. Hard. And it should be. Because the business mechanics of media access are not complicated. Large platforms need content. They need faces, names, moments that generate clicks and conversation. And here is the uncomfortable reality. King Charles is not sitting down for intimate tell-all conversations. Prince William is not making himself available for the kind of emotionally loaded interview that drives viral engagement. The senior working royals have quite deliberately chosen restraint. That restraint is not weakness. That is dignity. But what it does, functionally, is create a vacuum. And when a vacuum exists in the media ecosystem, someone fills it. So when Harry is willing to show up, willing to speak, willing to perform vulnerability for the camera, he becomes the accessible royal, the one who gives outlets what they want. And audiences need to sit with that reality because it explains a great deal about why the coverage looks the way it does. Access shapes narratives, always has, always will. Beyond the access dynamic, there are commentators now raising the question of whether broader ideological or cultural lenses are influencing how these stories get constructed for different audiences. And look, whether or not you subscribe to that particular theory, you cannot dismiss what it represents. A growing public refusal to simply receive coverage as neutral. People are interrogating framing. They are asking who benefits from this story being told this way, and they are arriving at conclusions that major outlets are not comfortable with. That discomfort is visible. And it should be. What we are watching, at the root of all of this, is a collapse of trust. Not trust in the monarchy, trust in the reporting. When audiences consistently feel that context is being stripped away, that inconvenient facts are being soft-pedaled, that the same cast of commentators keeps appearing to deliver the same predetermined conclusions. Skepticism is not paranoia. It is the rational response. Some viewers will read a headline and move on. Others will dig. And the ones who dig are increasingly finding an architecture underneath the coverage that does not hold up to scrutiny. Now, one specific moment in this latest wave of coverage has ignited sharper criticism than almost anything else. A former royal correspondent was brought in to deliver the verdict that King Charles's legacy, his entire legacy, could be tarnished by the ongoing family rift, specifically if reconciliation does not happen on Harry's timeline. That statement has genuinely infuriated people, and you can understand why. The suggestion that a man who has spent decades in public service, whose charitable record spans generations, whose ascension to the throne was decades in the making, that this man's entire historical standing could be reduced to whether or not he makes personal concessions to a son who publicly dismantled the family's privacy and dignity, is not analysis. It is pressure, dressed up as analysis. And critics are pushing back hard. Because the family tensions we are discussing did not materialize out of thin air. They did not descend on the royal family from some external force. They were generated through interviews, through a Netflix documentary, through a memoir that named names and aired private conversations, through a sustained, monetized public campaign that positioned the institution as the villain and the couple as its survivors. That is the context that keeps getting omitted. That is the thread that keeps getting cut before it reaches the inconvenient end. The division in public opinion is real and it is fierce. On one side, you have people who believe that a monarchy and a father should absorb any amount of public attack and respond only with outstretched arms. On the other side, you have people who understand that accountability does not disappear because the person demanding forgiveness happens to be family. That clash is not going away, and there is something else being pulled back into focus right now: the labels and characterizations that critics applied to this couple years ago. Some commentators are questioning whether those descriptions still apply. Others are watching the evidence accumulate and asking a far more pointed question. Were those characterizations not warnings, but simply early documentation of exactly what we are still watching unfold today? The answer, for this audience, has always been obvious. The documentation was always there. The pattern was always visible. The only variable was whether people were willing to name it clearly. And now, years into this unfolding collapse, the naming has become impossible to avoid. What we are watching right now is not a new story. It is the same story, finally arriving at the chapter that was always coming. Let's talk about legacy, because that word gets thrown around constantly in Meghan and Harry's orbit, usually by them or their proxies. and almost always as a shield. The argument goes something like this. Whatever controversies exist, whatever relationships they've burned, whatever trust they've shattered, the work speaks for itself. The impact is real. The outcomes justify everything, and that argument deserves to be examined head-on, not dismissed, because it is the last line of defense they have left, and you need to understand exactly why it doesn't hold. There are people in charitable and advocacy spaces who have done quiet, consistent, unglamorous work for decades. No cameras, no Netflix deals, no six-figure speaking fees, just sustained effort that produces real outcomes for real people. That work is genuinely admirable, and it is precisely that standard against which Meghan and Harry's self-proclaimed legacy collapses so completely. Because what they have built is not a record of service. It is a brand architecture, carefully constructed around the language of service. Those are not the same thing. One is built on sacrifice, the other is built on perception management. The people who defend this couple point to associations, to affiliations, to moments of visibility at causes that do meaningful work. And yes, meaningful work exists in those spaces. But attaching your name to meaningful work is not the same as doing it. Proximity to impact is not impact. A photograph next to someone whose life genuinely changed is not evidence that you changed it. This distinction matters enormously, and it is one that the couple's most devoted supporters consistently refuse to make. Meanwhile, the media ecosystem around them has always operated in ways that reward availability over integrity. When access to established royal figures is restricted or simply unavailable, attention migrates toward whoever will open the door. Meghan and Harry have always kept that door open, on their terms, through their platforms, with their approved framing. That dynamic has shaped coverage in ways that served them spectacularly when the narrative was warm, and is now working ruthlessly against them as the narrative has curdled. The machine they learned to operate has learned to operate without them. And now watch what is happening in real time, because the conversation has escaped every container they tried to put around it. Social media has not simply amplified this story, it has dismantled the production design around it. Clips get isolated, timelines get mapped, statements from 2019 get placed next to statements from 2023, and the contradictions are left sitting there, unedited, for anyone to examine. You cannot soft-focus a side-by-side comparison. You cannot spin a timestamp. This is the environment that Meghan and Harry fundamentally misread. They built a strategy for a media landscape that no longer exists, one where sympathetic editors could be relied on, where unfavorable coverage could be countered with a well-placed exclusive, where the volume of positive press could drown out the questions underneath. That landscape is gone. What replaced it is something far less controllable and far more revealing. Millions of people with search bars and long memories, doing the analysis themselves and sharing the results at a speed that no communications team can outpace. The silence from their camp in the face of specific, pointed scrutiny is telling. Not because silence is inherently an admission, but because this couple has never chosen silence when the alternative served them. They have given interviews to address grievances. They have released statements to correct narratives they disliked. They have gone to extraordinary lengths, on camera and on the record, to shape public perception. The selective deployment of silence now, at precisely the moments when clear answers would settle the most damaging questions, is a choice. And the audience is reading that choice correctly. Every unanswered question extends the conversation. Every non-response feeds the scrutiny. Every week that passes without a direct, honest accounting of the contradictions in their public record is another week the gap between their stated identity and documented reality grows wider and more visible. They are not being persecuted by that gap. They created it. They widened it. They are living inside the consequences of their own construction. The royal watchers, the commentators, the online communities tracking every statement and every court document and every quietly updated biography, they are not conspiracy theorists. They are people paying attention, and what they have collectively built across thousands of posts and threads and breakdowns is something remarkably close to a complete record, a timeline that holds together, a pattern that repeats, a character portrait assembled from the subject's own words and choices with very little editorializing required. That is what makes this moment different from any earlier chapter of this saga. The case against Meghan and Harry is no longer being made primarily by critics. It is being assembled from their own archive. Their own statements contradict each other. Their own ventures underperform against their own promises. Their own timeline of victimhood falls apart against the documented sequence of events. They have become the primary source for their own exposure. What we are left with is a picture that requires no embellishment and no exaggeration. A couple who leveraged one of the most powerful institutions in the world for access, resources, and global visibility, then weaponized their departure from it for a second wave of profit. A couple who built their entire public identity around authenticity while litigating what others were allowed to say about them. A couple who claimed the desire for privacy while granting interviews to anyone who would carry their preferred narrative. A couple who have now watched every major venture fail, every major alliance fracture, and every sympathetic media cycle dry up, and who still have not offered a single honest accounting of the role their own decisions played in producing this outcome. The story is not over, but the verdict has been visible for a long time. And right now, the evidence is simply catching up to what the most clear-eyed observers understood from the very beginning. If you've been watching this story unfold and you knew from the beginning how it would end, you belong here. Palace Leaks covers what the mainstream press is too polite to say plainly. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over and every new chapter proves the point.